Hello everyone, I'm Ridi Tlabi and I'm joining you from the Digital Media Zone here in the World Bank Atrium at the World Bank Group and IMF Spring Meetings 2023. We are continuing the conversation on how to green supply chains, a critical topic for helping protect the planet. I'm so delighted to be here with Priyamvada Singh, who's a Global Head of Supply Chain Finance at SMBC. Now, SMBC is a lender that works in sustainable financing and a recent partner of IFC. And I'm also joined by Wagner Albuquerque de Almeida, IFC Director for Global Manufacturing, Agribusiness and Services. We've been discussing ways to make global supply chains more sustainable and inclusive. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you with us, Priyamvada. We'll start with you. What sort of role do you see for SMBC and its partnership with IFC in meeting the kind of goals and targets that we've been discussing on greening supply chain?
Thank you for having me. So SMBC is actually, in contrast to what you mentioned earlier, not a recent partner for IFC. SMBC and IFC have worked together for many years to build on enabling project finance in emerging markets, and more recently, actually, certainly around sustainable supply chains. In terms of actually SMBC's footprint, of course, we are a global bank, and we're a significant trade finance bank globally. We provide trade finance to corporates and supply chains all over the world. Our presence is significant in Americas, North and South, in EMEA region as well, and of course our home ground Asia. We've heard a lot actually today about, of course, and the conversation over the last few years around the need for sustainable finance investment. If by any measure the increase in investment in sustainable finance has ballooned over the last few years. However, the challenge still remains about what can banks and financial institutions do to support the needs for the actual investment that's needed to be made to make a difference towards climate goals. If we are to halve greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, there's over $30 trillion of investment needed in sustainable finance. Now, banks and financial institutions certainly are a provider of capital, but it's not nearly enough. And I think in partnership with multilaterals, where our goals are aligned around meeting climate change targets, most banks, including us, have announced net zero targets. We've made commitments towards reducing our emissions supported fuel as a loan portfolio as well. In that regard, a partnership with multilateral agencies where we can align on the sustainable goals that we want to achieve, especially in markets where a partnership can sometimes make the difference. So it can make an investment possible because in partnership we are able to provide not just financial solutions but also non-financial solutions. And in that, investment and advisory together are a very powerful component that we believe actually we can get in partnership with IFC.
Mm-hmm. Well, partnerships are very important, but equally important is what strategies and products to finance. Can you just share with us IFC's strategies and products that are designed to help the private sector achieve more sustainable supply chain? And I'm particularly interested because earlier we spoke about the apparel industry, but there must be some new industries that ought to come into focus.
Okay, let's start with the industries. Yes? If you look around, what we see textile, we see tile, we see steel, everything is part of somehow some kind of value chain. Supplying these value chains is at least, based on some estimates that we have, around to $17 trillion as part of the global trade. Also, when we talk about the global trade, we are talking about that maybe 80% of all trade activities somehow is linked to this. So look for the supply chain is something natural for us to look. Now, what are we doing? Is this something new? Is something recent? No, IFC has more than a decade financing this kind of activities. And where these activities I think is important and what kind of instruments that we use. One thing that I wanted to make clear, the strategy is not only about money. It's money plus knowledge. Money plus standards. It's money plus capacity. And this is exactly the focus that we have. So to give you a little bit of some ideas, we have two big programs today, okay? One, which is what we call the global trade supply finance, and the second one, which is something recent that we are doing, which is the global supply chain finance. These are the main products that we use, but we are not limited to that. The main difference is how we reach the clients. Who are the clients? Clients, we are using the big corporates to reach the small corporates or the small SMEs, to give access to funding. This is something interesting. The gap for funding for the small clients, for SMEs or corporates, is at least 40% of the global trade. So they have credit, but they cannot access the credit. So that's why we have one of the programs is using the leverage of the big buyers, like the apparel industry. Yeah. Or we use partners like SMBC to reach a much broader pool of clients. So it's not only about money, it's money plus advisory service, sustainability standards. And we raise a question, what is sustainability? Yes? It's not only about climate. It's about climate, it's about gender, it's about diversity, it's about doing the right thing. So in summary, we need to grow a lot because the challenge is too big.
Right. And Priyamvada, I'll come back to you. I mean, you've got extensive experience here, decades of experience in supply chain finance and sustainability. What do you see as the biggest opportunity? And with opportunity, there will come the challenges then to achieving real change in global supply chain.
So, as an institution, of course, we recognize the role that banks and financial institutions need to play to achieve net zero. We are, over 2 years ago, we joined the Net Zero Banking Alliance. We were actually amongst the first bank to endorse the TCFD recommendations. And we were also one of the first financial institutions to actually publish our the emissions calculations, which would have based on the physical risk that the banks would face. It's widely recognized, and you touched upon it as well, actually, Wagner, in your comments around money and data. Now, certainly the investment that's required in sustainable finance, corporations would like to be more sustainable, but corporations also like to make money. Who doesn't? Right? So very often, I think, and to answer your question specifically on the opportunities and the challenges, the opportunity, I think, is there for everyone to recognize that making investment in ensuring greening of the supply chain, social investments, improving labor standards, and generally working towards ensuring that there is long-term, not just sustainability for the greater good, but also long-term resilience and financial stability in the supply chain. That's a large part of the sustainability conversation as well. It's not just about doing good. It's because investment in sustainable finance is good business. It makes sense. And so the opportunity for corporations certainly is, especially the events of the last 2 years, right? What has come to light is that this recognize that we have to have much more control and visibility into the supply chain. We have to understand the vulnerabilities of how we're exposed to events like, of course, of the last 2 years, but other events that could happen on macroeconomic or political level. And the visibility into supply chains is, we also heard about the role of technology. And technology is, I think, as probably an area which is going to present the greatest opportunity for financial institutions, companies, cities, corporations, governments to actually harness the power and be able to make a difference. At SMBC, we've done a number of things actually in looking at technology investments. Apart from, of course, our partnership with IFC on the Global Trade Supplier Finance Program and other initiatives to support trade, we've done proof of concepts with a company actually around identifying the sustainability journey for any company is basically 4 steps, right? Planning, implementation, measurement, and then optimize.
Right.
The biggest work is required in actually the planning and implementation and understanding how to get more visibility into, we talked about SME suppliers. When corporations are pushing standards down into the supply chain, SME suppliers are the ones that struggle the most with understanding how to conform to those sustainability standards. So SMBC has actually worked with technology partners. We worked with a company called Almeida Japan, which is using AI and machine learning to use data and data extracted from unstructured formats. So any kind of data that's presented by suppliers in the supply chain can be absorbed, extracted, and actually be used as a feed into an emissions calculation tool. We worked with a company called Persephone to develop a GHG emissions mapping tool called Sustaina that actually can really do a carbon footprint of the supply chain when data is produced. We've worked with a company called Alganize, I mentioned. Givable, we worked with a company called Givable, which is actually working with SME suppliers in particular to address the challenges around how suppliers produce data and how that data can actually be used to meet KPIs that the larger corporations are imposing on the suppliers. So a number of these initiatives, I think it's incumbent upon financial institutions, not just for financial and advisory, but also non-financial value-added services that we can provide to customers to help them along this journey.
Right. So a very broad spectrum of opportunities and challenges, and also practical examples as well. And Wagner, that's my next question to you, because we want to talk about the challenges, we want to talk about the opportunities. Same question to you. What do you see as the biggest opportunity in this space, and the challenges too?
Okay, let's start with the challenge, okay? And then we close maybe on the positive side. Yes?
Good.
So on the challenge for me is really accountability and transparency. How, I think sometimes we go to sectors that the standards are not there yet. How do I call something which is sustainable? How do I give access maybe to the right clients who really need them? I think the lack of process to define what is this industry, the complexity of this industry, and how all these other factors which goes far beyond the financial side, the financial metrics, is something that we need to do it. And we need to be accountable for that. We need to make sure that not only we have the right standards, that we define the right standards, that we decide the right metrics that we will follow, but also we've reported this in the right metrics. I will give you an example. IFC, more than a decade ago, started to do the sustainability link pricing. It was a very interesting idea. Okay, so we evolved our learning process, working with the partners to develop this tool. This opened us really the conversation about blue bonds or sustainability, other sustainability pricing linked, because we're starting to create the foundation to define what we want, to track what we want, and to report what we want. I think that's really the key mess. The challenge here is to develop this together. It's not something what IFC can do alone, that the banks can be alone, the private equity can be. No, everybody needs to do together. And also, the challenge is to leverage the good works that the countries and the industry develop. For example, you go to India, they have a very interesting foundation, their infrastructure. You go to Latin America, you go to Africa, to South Africa, to Kenya. So Nigeria, how to leverage this in the favor of the cause. And what is the favor of the cause? And then maybe here there is maybe the chance, what is the positive side, okay? We don't know the answers. It's the innovation, it's the creation together, it's to develop new areas of work. How many new industries that they will be creating? When we talk about EVs, the supply chain of the EVs is a very complex issue. But the solution of the problem is you create new kind of professionals, they will create a new kind of industries that we are not imagining today. So I think the creation of the health, the prosperity for everyone, I think that's really the big challenge, the big opportunities that we have, that we are not seeing.
We'll leave it on that challenging but positive note as well. I'm really glad to have spoken to you and all your great efforts, and sending you best wishes in this endeavor. Thank you, Priyamvada Singh, for joining us, and Wagner Albuquerque, the Almeida. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And that's it then. We want you to stay and share your comments online, to use the hashtag reshaping development. Thank you so much for staying with us throughout. I'm Ridi Klabi. Goodbye.